Welcome to the 2026 CSC U Summit, our two-day online learning experience for emerging athletic communications professionals, young professionals in the first 3 years, undergrad and graduate students, interns, and anyone else curious about our profession. This session will focus on moments that make our jobs as sports communicators worth it. My name is Sammi Wellman. I'm the Director of Sports Information at Riverside City College. And the 2026 CSC U Summit is presented by the CSC U Committee, and I'm excited to serve as today's moderator. Thank you to all who have submitted questions during the registration. We also want to encourage you to submit additional questions using our chat box feature on your screen. And we also want to encourage you to turn on your video so we can see you. Be fully tuned in to get the most out of this session. We set the session up as more of a roundtable for your chance to connect and network with our panel. If you drop in the questions, we'll try to call on you and ask you to unmute so you can ask your question to our team. I'm joined by a group of industry professionals who are ready to share their career journeys and advice with you all. To start us off, I'd like each of our panelists to introduce themselves. And Sophia, we'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. Super excited to be on this panel. My name is Sophia Anderson. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Assistant Director of Athletics Communications at Oberlin College. Oberlin is a D3 institution in the North Coast Athletic Conference in Oberlin, Ohio, just about 40 minutes outside of Cleveland. And I've been at Oberlin since July, so I'm just finishing up my first year here at Oberlin, but I started getting into this career journey when I was in undergrad. I was a sophomore at Mount Holyoke College, another D3 school, but that was in Massachusetts. And I was on the cross country and track and field team. And I started doing athletics communications as one of the student interns, like I'm sure many of you are. And I just operated like the live stream camera. I did some soccer stats and then thought it was really cool. And then did some volleyball and got more into the stats side and learned about writing and graphics and social media and all the different aspects of our position. So after I graduated from my undergrad, I went into my master's and then I got my master's in exercise and sports studies at Smith College, just down the road from Mount Holyoke. And I was an intern at Smith, but then also at Amherst College, a Division III school, again, just down the road from Smith. So all of those three schools are within a 30-minute drive. And then once I finished my master's and finished up my internship at Amherst, and then I came to Oberlin, which is where I am now. And I do all aspects of the job with stat keeping, social media, recap writing, game day management, a little bit of content creation, especially with more videos for me. And then here at Oberlin, we don't split sports. So I help cover all 21 varsity sports here at Oberlin. So yeah, excited to be on this panel and excited to get to know all of you a little bit more.
Thanks, Sophia. Jordyn, what about you?
Hey everybody, I'm Jordyn Rochon, the Director of Communications and Creative Content for UMass Lowell out in Lowell, Massachusetts. To give you kind of a rundown of how I got into comms and graphic design, I guess I'll start a little backwards. I graduated from the University of New Hampshire with a degree in sports studies. It was there that I learned everything in the communications office. I needed to intern in the office in order to get hours in order to graduate. So I had no idea what I wanted to do in life and said, let's start at comms where they know everything and interact with everybody. So from there, I was able to meet some connections in the Hockey East Conference. After graduation, I saw that UMass Lowell, who was also in the Hockey East Conference, was hiring for a communications assistant, which is where I landed my first full-time role. I worked at Lowell as the SID for women's basketball, soccer, lacrosse, and a few others during that time. I began at a smaller school, Division I school, having communications with our office is a lot more of a dual role with creative. So as I was there, I was really into the graphic design aspect of it. And during that time, I was building out my portfolio. We were working during COVID, which was a time when games weren't happening. So we needed creative content in order to kind of fill that empty spot. So I was able to build up my portfolio. And from there, like I said, really drawn to the creative role, wanted to take a jump, not only move away from New England, where I was raised all my life, but I wanted to take a jump to a larger scale to a Power Four school, which is where I ended up as the assistant director for graphic design at the University of Oklahoma. There, I was working as a design team of three people in the graphics department, including season creative for each team's facility designing, whatever the athletic department needed internally, we were there for. I was the lead designer for the women's gymnastics team, which I was there for back-to-back national championships. Again, after building my portfolio, all these cool experiences, I wanted to see what else I could do with it, which is where I took a total pivot out of athletics. And I wanted to see what website designing, e-commerce, kind of the some would say the more boring side to designing creative rather than being in sports and the crazy chaos. But I highly recommend that for anybody in creative. Web designing and e-commerce is such a big thing, and there's so many freelance opportunities as well in our position. Uh, so from there, out of my stint out of college athletics, I got a call from Ashley Robbins, who is now my boss, also panel moderator tomorrow. So go check her out. She called me up, said she had a new creative role that was kind of a half creative content, half communications, getting back to my roots. So fast forward to now, I've been in this role since I think October. We've made it through a full basketball season, almost softball season. So I am working as an SID for women's basketball and softball, while also getting all of our creative together for our department, kind of like that dual, like I said, creative. A little bit weird of a path to where I am today, but I wouldn't change a thing about it. So thank you all for having me.
Thanks, Jordyn. And Mike, over to you.
Thanks so much, Sammy. Pleasure to be on to speak with you all today. I've I've been in the business now. I think I'm finishing up my 20th year full time. So I've been at this for a while and seen the business change in a lot of different ways, which is really the last few years in particular has been great to see with all the changes that have been made in this organization for the positive in my opinion. And I think it's great to have so many more creatives part of our group, brings such a different communication style to what we do and here at Illinois State, we're Division One in the Missouri Valley Conference and right in the middle of Central Illinois. We actually have kind of pivoted in the last couple of years to now where we have an entire digital social creative team that works housed in the same area that my communications team is housed, and we work very, very closely together. Each sport has a team, one videographer, one digital social, and then one SID. And then the three of us are kind of that team's crew. We travel, we come up with content ideas, we bounce stuff off each other. We try to tell the stories of our student athletes and coaches to the best of our abilities, and it's really cool. So I started here at Illinois State back in 2005 or 2004 as an intern, I guess. And then I got my master's degree, was here from 2005 to '07, working primarily with football as the assistant football person and then baseball. But I needed a full-time job out of grad school, even though I didn't want to leave my alma mater. But I went to Indiana State, which is also here in the Missouri Valley Conference, and worked there for 2 years. Got a lot of great experience, met some incredible people, got to be the media coordinator for two NCAA cross country championships, which your first job out of school to get to do that is pretty awesome. Especially for me, not having ever worked really closely with cross country in the past. Learned a lot about that sport and kind of what it takes to put on an NCAA championship. So that was tremendous for me to have. But I got an opportunity to come back to my alma mater in 2009 and get a little bit back closer to home and family, and I've been here ever since, working primarily with football. Um, Now I work with women's basketball, our tennises, and gymnastics as well. I've worked with gymnastics for about 12 seasons. But over my time here, I've kind of had to jump in as staff changes have happened and people have left to get new jobs. I think I've done about every one of our 19 sports at some point in time as an interim communications person. So I've dealt with a lot of coaches, dealt with a lot of student athletes, a lot of different teams. But it's been a pleasure, and looking forward to start year 18 with our football team next year, and it's going to be an exciting year, and I'm just happy to be here and help any way I can today.
Thanks, Mike. Speaking of championships, obviously those are the highs of our job, the kind of the fuel that electrifies us. Talk about some of those championship moments where there was high energy, long hours, but somehow it didn't necessarily feel that way. Talk about that with you, Mike, first.
Yeah, I mean, with football in particular, we've had a chance here at Illinois State to make two FCS national championship games. And the first time we went in 2014, it was only my third year in this particular role as assistant AD. So I was still not quite, didn't know what to do, kind of was still figuring out my job and figuring out how to manage a staff. So that one was a little different, and the whole time I was there, people were like, "Man, that must have been so much fun." And I said, "No, it wasn't. I was so busy. I felt like I was so stressed. I wanted to make sure everything was happening right. We'd never been there before. So I wanted to put on a good foot for myself, but for the university, and wanted to make sure we were taking care of all the media opportunities and all those things." So this year we got the opportunity to go back again, and I made myself kind of stop and smell the roses a little bit. I wanted to make sure that, yes, not only was I still doing all of those things and making sure that the coaches and players were getting to their media opportunities, and we were answering emails, and we were getting and doing all of the stuff that was on the itinerary that was asked of us. But I wanted to make sure that I took time to enjoy it as well, because I didn't feel like I got to do that the first time. And it's very different when you're hosting a championship, whether that be a conference championship or an NCAA championship, and you're working kind of from the back end with the NCAA or with the conference office. It's a completely different set of responsibilities than if you're one of the participating teams and the participating communications teams. So the very different things that I've had an opportunity to be. I think I've done media coordination for 7 or 8 different sports here, along with our colleagues at the Missouri Valley Conference for championships we've hosted on campus. So that's kind of getting old hat at this point in time. It's easy, but when your team's playing on national television, which some schools are very used to, at Illinois State that doesn't happen as much as some other places. So getting that opportunity and just kind of getting time to breathe and enjoy and reflect on all of the cool things that happened and all of the great exposure that our university and our student athletes and coaches received. Um, it's great. Even though the game didn't go the way we wanted it to, it was still an unbelievable experience for us, and I know it was for the players and coaches as well.
And Jordyn, you have some experience with some higher energy moments with gymnastics. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, totally reiterating what Mike just said, kind of stopping to smell the roses for a second, realizing that you're in such a big moment and you did work hard to get here. You didn't get there for no reason. I remember it was my second year working with women's gymnastics. They had just won the previous national championship. There was a few people online that I think didn't think they could do it again, especially for a sixth time. And after a long season, they made it back to the national championship. I was able to travel with them to Fort Worth after being there, editing my graphics in real time, like sitting at the edge of my seat, trying to stay neutral in the press area as the whole arena is going insane. Just kind of sitting in that moment, like soaking it in, saying, like, I'm here alongside them, being able to tell a small piece of this women's sports history, which was awesome. Like I said, just stop, smell the roses. You're here.
So you talk about editing graphics real time. Do you like start building those out ahead of time, or like talk about that process where you're at the championship editing those, because things can change at any moment. How do you go through those emotions?
Great question. We do have a thing that we like to say in the design world called the graphic graveyard. Some things you make are not going to make it out there. So you do a lot of prep beforehand. We prepped everything. I remember sitting in the coffee shop with our videographer. We're in downtown Fort Worth, trying to pump out all of our All-American graphics right before the national championship's about to start. Like it's an intense moment, but it's so much fun being able to be a part of that and the preparation. So um, some of the things you do beforehand, you can do in the office, absolutely. But when it came down to those moments where we're in arena, I'm on the fly. I didn't think someone was going to win. We came back. We secured the national championship and didn't think so at the end. So having all the assets ready as maybe this could go one way or maybe this could go the other way. You just got to be ready sitting there and being able to have the opportunity. Not every team does take support staff sometimes. So being able to be a part of a team that really encourage their support staff to be there and advocating for us to be there in the moment. We're able to tell the story a lot better. We get to see it through our eyes, which helps us tell the story behind the camera and especially on social too. So
Thanks. Sophia, what's a moment that you felt like this is why I do what I do?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I do, right? Like I said, I do a mix of the more traditional sports information, athletics, communications positions, but I also do a lot of content creation, and specifically in like the video realm, and I really enjoy making videos that make that impact, especially if I hear from the student athletes like that was a great video or that, that meant so much to me, meant so much to my parents. A couple different specific things come to mind. So when I was at Smith and Mount Holyoke, I was kind of at two institutions at once for one semester, but I had the opportunity to go to two different cross country national championships. So Division three. One year it was when I was with Mount Holyoke, so it was really just my one teammate and friend who was running as an individual. And then the year later, I was traveling with Mount Holyoke, but I was working for Smith, and they had all their top eight runners who qualified as a team. And so I remember going and traveling with them, and I really love traveling with the teams, especially when it's the championships, whether it's conference championships or NCAA championships. I think it's a great experience. It's an opportunity one for me to just travel and see new places, go to places that I haven't been before, but then also just to get to know the athletes a bit more because you're spending maybe 4 or 5 days with them over a small time, and they have their competitions and their practices, but then you also have a lot of downtime where you're maybe doing fun stuff, touristy stuff. But yeah, when I was with Smith, we were in Michigan. I made this a couple of videos. I made like a travel video that was everything besides the actual race, and then I did more of a highlight video. And I remember I was editing it on, on the plane ride back. We left on Saturday at like 4 p.m. So I was just like on the plane editing the video. I think it was out that same night. But then like hearing the feedback from the athletes and seeing the comments and the engagement from parents, especially that like it was a really engaging video or that it made them feel like they were there to celebrate that moment. That was really special. And then I also really enjoy making more end of the year videos. For most of the institutions I've worked for, we have like an end of the year ceremony. And so usually there's like one video that has little highlights from each of the different sports, whether it's 13 sports because both Mount Holyoke and Smith are historic women's colleges, or it's up to 27 sports at Amherst or Oberlin. And just having those like highlight videos and using little sound bites from maybe the broadcast or something to really make it engaging and special and having some sort of emotional music. Those usually, I think people really enjoy them and love to see those like collective moments shared together. And just like hearing the feedback about those videos is really special and something I enjoy a lot.
Awesome. So I know you all have been able to travel with teams. I know when I've traveled with teams before, you always get someone asking, "Oh, like what's your role?" And like, "Are you a coach?" Or I once got asked if I was part of the team, and I was like, "Do I look like I'm part of the team?" So when people ask you like what exactly, because I mean, I'm sure there's been times where you say, "Oh, I'm sports information," and they go, "What is that?" How do you explain to people what your job is and get them like excited about, oh, like you're the one that's behind the team, you're the one telling their story? Mike, let's go to you.
I think, I mean, the easiest way, like I said, my job has changed just in the last year to where, as of even last year, I was kind of doing both. I was kind of doing the digital social. I was taking photos. I wasn't touching video. I've never touched video. That's one thing I've never been good at. But I was still doing, all, we were updating templates in Photoshop and all the kinds of stuff that we do with digital social content. So just this year, I'm literally just what I would call the traditional SID. I'm doing game notes, I'm doing stories and recaps, I'm doing bios, I'm updating web stuff, obviously handling all stats. So it's a little bit different because I think even people that have known me for a while, or maybe some parents that run into me were like, "Hey, you used to do this, don't you still do this?" I go, "No, that's not me anymore." So it's a little different, but I think the easiest way is to just said, you know, for anybody on this call is you can say I'm a storyteller because we all, in whatever way we do it, we tell the stories of our student athletes and our teams and our coaches. Um, and then if they get, if they dive a little deeper and want to know a little bit more, then you can maybe say, "Oh, well, that did you see that recap or that feature that I wrote? Yeah, that was me, or did you see the graphic that got created? Oh yeah, that was me, or that was my colleague that put that together." Um, so I think most of your parents and things like that, they kind of understand it, but I tell people, I joke all the time. I still don't think my parents know exactly what I do on a day-to-day basis, and I've been doing it for almost 20 years. I try to explain it, but the thing with our job is it changes so much. So, what I was doing 20 years ago is definitely not what I'm still doing. It's changed so much. So I think you just have to tell people. I tell the stories of our student athletes, and if they ask question follow up, then you can maybe dive a little deeper. But that's really all we're here to do, right? That's all any of us are in this business and this profession for, is to tell stories and to tell the good stories and the great positive things that are happening at our universities.
So obviously there's going to be fun parts to our job, but then there's also going to be some not so fun parts, whether it's dealing with a crisis, dealing with a sensitive topic. So when you're dealing with those, how do you navigate those moments and be able to still find like some sort of purpose within your job? So, if Jordyn, let's go to you. Is there a crisis or chaotic moment that you feel like you got through and you felt a sense of accomplishment through it?
Definitely I had a crisis moment I can share. I love telling this one on all of my job interviews when they've said, "How do you handle crisis management?" I remember it was my senior year of college. I was working at UNH for the hockey team, and I'll literally never forget this. I was calling stats for a hockey game, and our camera operator was right next to the computer where we inputted everything on. Halfway into the third period, the camera guy passes out on top of our stats. Like, this is a lesson to be learned. He's fine. He's totally fine now. But bend your knees when you're operating a camera. Always bend your knees for long hours. So not only was like an actual crisis situation, but we had stats going at the same time, which is a crisis situation in itself for sports when you miss one stat. So not only having both of those happening at the same time, our whole team of interns, I don't know how, stayed calm to this day. I just think I remember that moment so specifically of like we were all on the headset saying, yes, something's happening behind us that's going crazy right now, but we still have our job to do at the end of the day. And it was a perfect moment of like anything can happen in sports, literally, and the chaos can strike at any moment. But it's all a matter of how you bounce back and recover from it. So quite literally, like that guy bounced back and recovered from passing out. So it's a quirky little story, but definitely a more interesting one on game days that I've had in my career. So
So you talked about your group of like interns and stuff all kind of staying calm. What was that conversation like after the game? Like just kind of going through like what really happened? How did we get through that?
it was the pure shock, silence, a lot of dumbfounded faces. But I remember we didn't even miss a stat through the whole thing. We just had people that were very confident in their roles and in their positions, and we're very confident in the situation. Like we know chaos can happen at any moment. We know there's injuries on the field and also behind. So it was all about everybody. Like I said, it was a random group of interns that actually had never met each other on that day. We always get random game day interns assigned. So I think everybody was really confident in their roles and communicating. Communicating was the biggest thing at that point. All we had was communication. So like I said, everyone stepped up in their roles at that point and we got it done. Like at the end of the day, our job can get done.
So, Sophia, you talk about how you do kind of everything for your sports. Um, Obviously, with athletics, something can go wrong at any given moment. Like even Jordyn was talking about. How do you stay grounded when it feels like everything is going wrong?
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely the type of person who, if one thing goes, I just feel like it's just so hard to then just bring it back. But whether it be like announcing, or like if you just mess up someone's name and then you're just like so rattled by that, or if it's a stat or something. Um, but when it comes down to it, when I was in undergrad, and this is something that like I had a pretty big advanced notice for, but when I was an undergrad at Mount Holyoke, my supervisor went on parental leave, and because it was a historic women's college, they only had one full-time SID. So I was a full-time student, but then I kind of took over all of the athletics communications responsibilities for those 10 weeks. And there were definitely times where, I'm announcing as a 21-year-old and just nervous about it, trying to read the script and missing the name and reading somebody else's name or reading the wrong hometown or something. And then sometimes in those moments, it's really just like taking a deep breath. The athletes don't know if you take an extra minute to read off the announcements. And if you mess up, you just kind of have to like pull the mic away, just take a second and then pull it right back. Because usually, especially when you're announcing, they kind of have their own walkout or something and then the cheer, and then you have a second to look at the next name or whatever. And then when it comes to the game stats, there were definitely a couple times when I was in undergrad where during those 10 weeks where I was just by myself and I didn't have a caller, I didn't have an inputter, and had only been doing stats for maybe a year or two for some of these sports, and having never played some of these sports, a lot of sports, even like basketball, a very common sport in the US, a sport I never played and a sport I rarely watched in high school. So and in those moments, with stats, I did have a caller who was the assistant basketball coach, but when we were using NLS, of course, it's a very sequential system. And then if you call in a different order and it's someone who is new to inputting, it can just kind of mess up your flow. So it's just one of those where you can't get stuck on one play. You just kind of have to keep up where you are, especially with like volleyball is a great example of that. If you miss a rally, you just input an ace or you input an error, and then you move on to the next and you go back later and fix it. So I think I'm pretty good, especially with stats. I'm really good at just picking up where we need to be and then going back and checking the live stream. Of course, having the live stream is super helpful. Everything can be fixed at the end of the game between periods or quarters. I really try to fix as much as I can. So by the end of the game, I'm just sending off the box scores to the opposing SIDs. But yeah, when it comes down to it, everything, especially with stats, everything can be fixed. And even if you miss something and then you get an email a couple of days later, a couple hours later, like that can be fixed. So I try to remind myself that at the end of the day, most things that we do, especially with when it comes to stats, can be fixed, and it is not going to drastically impact the experience of the student athletes because they might not even know that that is happening. So I just try to remind myself of that when things get crazy.
So true. I remember, so I had to learn volleyball stats in like 3 days. And the first time I went live, I cried after the game because I thought I messed everything up. And another SAD was like, no, you just had to do. And like, now I'm that person. Like, I'll be talking in the middle of stats. Like, it's so crazy how in the moment, especially when you're early on in your career, you're like, oh, panic. But once you get used to it, it starts being like, okay, I can go through this. I've gone through this. I've nothing at the end of the day is life or death in our profession. So, Mike, I know you've been around the business for a while. So, what kind of crisis, chaotic moments have occurred in your career that have kind of shaped who you are as a professional?
Yeah, I think unfortunately for me and for us here, I did have to deal with something that was pretty tragic. In fact, it was 11 years ago yesterday. We lost seven friends in a plane crash, and coming back from the NCAA championship, they were over there in Indianapolis, and they were flying back, and their plane went down, and I was 3 years into the business, or at least in this role. I'd been in the business a little bit longer than that, but there our AD said it on that morning. There's no playbook for something like that, right? We all have manuals for stats, and we have training videos for a lot of things that we do in our profession. There's all kinds of tutorials and things with it when it comes to Photoshop and some of those things that we do, but there was no playbook for something like this. The university had a crisis plan and things like that. So a lot of things kicked into gear before we even had to deal with it. But it was one of those things where I think anybody that comes from a communications background has taken that crisis communications class at whatever school they got their degree from. But you don't necessarily know if you're ever going to use it. Up until that time, the biggest crisis I had ever dealt with were the things that have already been talked about, communication issues or technology failures, or maybe at the worst, one of our student athletes did something stupid and got arrested over the weekend, and you have to figure out how you're going to deal with that. Um, but this was my direct boss was one of the guys on the plane. This was my mentor and a guy that I talked to every single day of my professional life when he came back. So in those times you have to try to put everything into perspective. And at that time, I mean, this became a national story. We were getting stuff from everywhere. CNN, every national news organization was covering this. So you can imagine what my email looked like. My email was a mix of people wanting information and needing information, and it was the other half of it was people sending condolences. So it was a very weird time for me to have to go through my email, because one would be job related and somebody needing something, and the other one would be somebody going, "Hey, if you need anything, I'm here," which was a very weird time and everybody involved was getting those same types of emails. But our focus at the time was just to make sure that we did everything we could to protect the families at the time. Our AD said that, and that became our focus. And really, for the next 2 days after that happened, until we can actually announce names and let processes go through, we had to keep things pretty tight and had to keep information close to the vest. And then when we had our press conference, it was the toughest thing I have ever done as a professional, and will be the toughest thing that I will ever have to do. There's nothing else. And to Sophia's point, nothing phases me now because I went through that. And I hope beyond hope that nobody out there ever has to deal with something like that. But unfortunately, we know those things happen. And it happens on every campus. No campus is immune to, unfortunately, having some sort of a tragedy, whether it be with a student athlete or a coach or an administrator or whatever it might be. And a lot of times the communication staff is on the front end of trying to figure out how to deal with that and how to communicate that. And our staff certainly was at that time. But we all banded together. We got some help with our university communications staff. They jumped in and helped wherever they could. And we just buckled down for 2 or 3 days. And the whole process took about 10 days. And I don't remember anything really a lot from those 10 days, because we were so busy and we were so locked in and we were so tried to make sure that everything was going well. And then after that time, I think, and as the years have passed, we've been able to look back on it and see how we handled things, maybe what we could have done better, what we could have changed. But for us, it was one of those moments, we had our 10-year anniversary last year, and we had a celebration out by the memorial that's in front of our stadium. And one of the wives of the guys who passed away came up to me and she goes, "We'll never be able to repay you and the rest of the crew with how you managed things over those, that 10-day, those 2-week period when we needed the help the most, you guys were there." And that's the biggest win I'll ever have in my career. No championship, no anything else is ever going to compare to her saying, "You guys really helped us out in the most difficult moment of our lives." So you never know when, when you're going to have to step into action, or what you're going to have to do, or what things going to go wrong that you're going to have to deal with. But if you do it the right way and you do it with the right intentions, and as to whatever situation you're dealing with, you're going to come out on top no matter what.
Yeah, I know there's going to be some tough moments, but when you reflect on those moments, especially if someone coming 10 years later to say, I appreciate everything you did, that's just amazing. So it's obviously not one of those highs where you got the wins, the championship, confetti, but it still is an impactful moment and obviously meant a lot to you. So that's awesome. Sorry, going into the day to day. So obviously we have the high moments, we have the low moments. How do you find the meaning but in the mundane moments, so what's a small everyday moment that you know kind of reminds you like, yeah, this is kind of something I have to do, but at the end of the day I did it and we're good with this. So Jordyn, do you have anything that comes to mind with that?
Yeah, definitely. I think finding the small everyday moments are the ones that you like usually aren't looking for, I feel like. Those are what make my day more special, more fun and chaotic. And I think that's what makes sports sports. It's the smiles on the athletes' faces when you show up to film practice randomly. They love being in front of that camera. They really do, as much as they probably shy away sometimes. It's the traveling with the teams and being part of the culture. Like I said, when you feel like you're part of that staff, you can really see them in a different light, which helps you out on your work end, on social, and being able to tell a story, not just of the athletes, but of the bigger picture of your season. Um, and I think the best teams on social are the ones that have great storytellers behind the cameras, actually caring about the team's message and wanting to put impactful pieces out there. Like I said, finding those small little moments can only help you and benefit you in your plan for your season.
Sophia, what about you? How do you find the passion in the mundane moments?
Yeah, I'll just say I do like a random task that's kind of might be boring to some people. Like I love making a word roster. So sometimes I enjoy those moments myself. It's because it's a time to relax a little bit. It's more low key. It's not like the stress of maybe a game day. So sometimes I do enjoy those moments. But um one thing that really changed my perspective on this career when I was at Amherst was that we're not necessarily behind the scenes. Like yes, there are like we're not working with athletes necessarily on a day-to-day basis like coaches are, but we are so very involved in the student athlete experience, and we have the power to be involved in the student athlete experience. When I was at Amherst College, Division III school, maybe 400 to 500 student athletes, we had almost 100 student workers on our student worker staff for athletics communications. And even if they weren't our student workers, we had people coming in all the time to get candy from our candy bowl because we were right by one of the main entrances of the facilities. And athletes would just chat and talk about their days, talk about maybe their practices, maybe they would, and sometimes even if they weren't our workers, sometimes they would sit in our office and just hang out and do homework for 30 minutes or something because it was a place that they wanted to be. Even if they, again, weren't doing work for us, they just wanted to be there for 30 minutes before their practice started. And I'm someone who is, I would say, a little bit more introverted. And in my previous positions at Smith and Mount Holyoke, I wasn't necessarily thinking about like how we could be so connected to the student athletes. I was thinking I like this position because I'm more behind the scenes and I maybe don't have to have the day-to-day interaction with student athletes. But then when I got to Amherst, I realized this is something that I really enjoy, talking to student athletes and hearing about their lives and maybe hearing more about what it's like to be on the team or their personal lives or their aspirations. And that's something I've really grown to enjoy. So here at Oberlin, even though we have about 40 to 45 student workers, we still have people coming in who, again, might not even be our student workers, but they might come in to say hi or they're coming in to do office hours. And I really enjoy those moments where for 10 minutes you're talking about their day and you're not necessarily talking about the work that needs to get done. So those moments have been really fun and and even if it's not just student athletes, even if it's a coach that pops in or a recruit pops in, those can be also really special.
Mike, what about you? Is there anything that has stood out to you that make you feel appreciated on campus or even in the digital world?
Yeah, I think to kind of piggyback off what Sophia was talking about, it's the little things that you get from something that maybe you didn't necessarily think was a lot of extra work, or something that you um worked with to create, that ended up having a huge impact. For example, I we had a football player who his dad played here. It was his senior year, and his little brother was playing at a school in the conference, and been playing well as a freshman. And so on his senior day, we have an honorary captain, a former player, go out for the coin toss. A lot of schools do that. So I was like, well, we'll have Scott go out, and we'll have him go out with the son, and that'll be a really cool moment for him. But then I called my friend that worked at the other school, and I said, hey, I know coaches are really particular about who goes out to coin tosses, this type of thing. I was like, would there be any way that Connor could go out for this, right? And got the call back, yeah, Connor's in. So as Scott, former player, alum, his one son is a senior, and going on to this, he comes out to do this coin toss, and here comes his son, his other son from the other sideline, and they meet. So he's out there with his two sons on a coin toss. It took 20 seconds to make that phone call, and no real like work for really anybody, other than just to say, hey, could he come out to a coin toss with the team? And it created a moment for those three guys that they still talk about to this day. And every time I see Scott at an alumni thing or something, he's, man, that was just the best moment. That was just the coolest thing. So it doesn't have to be something massive. It doesn't have to be a huge design project. It doesn't have to be a huge feature that took hours and hours to write, or some video that you took hours and hours to edit. It could just be a small, small thing that could have such a huge lasting impact. And then it just makes you feel good, right? Because you were able to give that student athlete, that parent, that coach, that donor, that ticket holder, whatever it might be, because we all know we serve a lot of different audiences in our job. But if you can do one little thing to make them feel just a little bit more special that day, and then they remember that and thank you down the road for it, you could be having a really terrible day, and then you have somebody randomly pop out of nowhere and come in and say, hey, when you did that, that was really awesome. Thanks. And it makes your day, because there's a lot of hard days in this profession, and we know that there's a lot of long hours, and a lot of time spent at competitions and on the road. But those little moments can make can turn a 2 day, grinding, just I'm tired, I'm worn out, I don't want to do this. And then you have something like that happen, and it just changes your whole perspective on things. So I urge everyone on the call to watch out for those little opportunities. Um, Take that extra 10 seconds to make that phone call, because you could be creating a memory for somebody for the rest of their life.
Jordyn, you talked about, looking out for the little moments. Um, has there been a little moment that has kind of stuck out to you where you're like, oh, I feel appreciated? And it wasn't necessarily like a big thing where, you got big award or whatever. It's just something small that you're like, oh, I feel valued.
Yeah, totally. Women's gymnastics, their staff was actually known to do handwritten notes all the time. That went such a long way with me personally, and I think with the whole department. They took the time to really appreciate and care about what we were doing and how we were doing, and they always showed that in some little way. And it was also really cool because I got to design the cards that they made for thank you cards, so I got my thank you card back to me with a little message. And I still have all of those thank you cards in my office at Lowell. Like I said, I have a lot of gear and stuff that they gave me, and I'm so appreciative of it. But those cards are what came with me on the next journey. Those were the moments. I mean, one day they just walked in my office and gave me crumble cookies just because we had a hard week. Like it's those little things, the Starbucks gift cards, the small little moments of appreciation, saying like, we see you, we see the work that you're doing, and we appreciate it because at the end of the day, not a lot of people have the time in their day to say thank yous, but a lot of people should say thank yous. So use those thank yous, use those exclamation points in those emails, take the time out of your day to make those phone calls, and give it back and forth.
Love that. Okay, Kara has a question for a panel.
Hi everyone, my name is Kara. I'm a marketing senior at Prairie View A&M University. It is such an opportunity to just be on here with you guys, Mike, Jordyn, Sophia, Sammi. Thank you all so much. My question is more towards entering into the sports industry. So right now I work with my sports media team here at my university, more so, like across all sports, basketball, football, volleyball, baseball, all of the sports, and I'm in videography as well as graphic design. So, like that content creation, Sophia, that you have experience with, and Jordyn, with your graphic design. So my question is, what do you all think matters most right now, like to college students? Would it be, portfolios, building connections, or, more so inconsistency? And how should we balance that as students?
Yeah, I can totally take that one if you want for to start. I remember when I was first starting out, like I said, with my internship with UNH, I used as many of those connections as I could. Any event that I went to behind the scenes, I mean, not stepping out in the limelight, but making your little way through the crowd and introducing yourself to people, getting your name out there, meeting people, friend requesting people on LinkedIn. It's not weird if you don't know them. Connect with them, message them, talk about how they've gotten into this role. I think just hearing people's stories and hearing about how all people have gotten to where they are now, like we said, there's so many different paths onto how we've all got here, every path is valuable to listen to. So definitely make your connections, and build that portfolio at the same time as you're doing that. Use those moments. Take a lot of behind the scenes photos to build your portfolio also. I know a lot of the times we focus on making the content for the team, but also at the same time you need to build up yourself as you're growing. So make sure you're always getting the I always love being on the court sidelines and getting my camera and my shoes in the shot and then having that on my Instagram story later. So taking the time, soaking in those moments, making the connections. Like I said, this is communication. We communicate with people, and it's something that we love to do. So yap away to people. Absolutely.
Sophia, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I can definitely agree that connections are super important. Because I am one of the more, I just kind of started my first full-time position, but when I was in grad school, I attended the CSC convention under the CSC student program. So I was one of 8 students who had like a mentor and attended the CSC convention, and then had that connection throughout the my career. And in the mentor program, we got a chance to meet all of the other mentors because it was a small group and we had a couple different meetings throughout the convention. And I made sure to connect with all of the different mentors, not just my own mentor. And one of the mentors I ended up connecting with and just like sending an email to thank her the after the convention. And I really love sending thank you emails. I also love sending thank you cards, physical cards in the mail. When I applied to my position here at Oberlin, I sent thank you cards to every single person that I connected with. And I remember coming back to Oberlin for my first day and just like saying hi to some of those coaches and then seeing the thank you card posted up in their office. But when I was at the CSC convention, I met Amanda Phillips, who was my supervisor, and she was one of the other mentors. And I remember emailing her after and just thanking her for like helping me build connections when we were at the convention. And then about a year later, I saw a job opportunity for Oberlin College. So you never know where those connections can lead you. For me, it ended up being a position because when I was talking to Amanda after, months after getting hired, she said, yeah, she recognized my name in the applicant pool. And then it was just that one little thing because coming from Massachusetts, sometimes it is easy to like hire someone who maybe is within the conference or has that experience. But because she knew me from that CSC connection, that helped my application stand out. While, of course, hopefully my resume also had some supporting factors, but that was one thing because people love to hire people that they know or people that maybe their friend knows or a colleague knows. So making those connections, even if it's not within your field, even if it's a soccer coach, because that everyone talks in this field and those can be really important.
So true. There's so many times where you look on a job and then you look in the athletics directory and you're like, oh, actually, I know that person. So we have two more questions and then we'll wrap up. Audrey, let's go to you first.
Hi, I'm Audrey. I'm from Illinois Wesleyan. I'm a sophomore here in communications and sports management. Going back to some of those like moments that make your job worth it, was there ever a moment when you were either first starting out in the field or maybe when you were a student that like someone, maybe a coach, maybe someone you work with, maybe even an athlete, they told you something or said something to you that made you go, oh yeah, I am on the right path. Like this is going to work out for me.
Mike, let's go to you.
Uh, I mean, I think it's kind of a collective thing. I don't, I more so I think it was during my undergrad that I had some professors that really believed in me and pushed me to get my first internship. Um, and a friend, obviously, a friend of mine that was in classes with me, she's the one that got me into the profession. She's like, my boss has an opening, you got to go talk to him. You got to go talk to him. And that's how I kind of got my foot into it. And then I had those initial bosses and mentors that really helped and pushed me along. But I think I honestly in my experience, it was more so I came into the business at a little bit of a different time that I had some old school coaches and they really, really, really tried to push me and see how much I could handle, and see how much I could react to, whether good or not. That's probably not the best way in the world to try to test out your crew and see what they can do. But I think it was that old school mentality. Let's see if they can handle some adversity. Let's see what if they can still do good work under pressure, which if you get out into the real world, you're going to run into that in any business that you run into, whether it's ours or any other different one. So I think that's really what kind of made me realize. I mean, I knew getting into this profession that this was kind of the best of both worlds with what my undergrad master's was in public relations and my love for sports. Like this was my dream job, right? This was something that I thought was, and then once I got into it as an intern, I only realized that further. But it took a while. It really took that graduate assistantship, that 2-year period to figure out, yeah, this is what I want to do for the long term. And it was a lot of little experiences along the way that helped me figure that out.
Okay, last question. Will.
What's up, guys? Good to meet you all. Thank you guys for being here and for talking to us. Yeah, I'm a GA at UMKC, Kansas City Roos, and just had a question kind of on the topic about, how you guys were talking about like getting support and those nice letters of appreciation or text from coaches or, uh, fans or just other people in the department. Just was wondering, kind of on the other side, if you guys have gone through like a season with handling a sport where maybe you felt like you weren't getting the support that you necessarily kind of needed for the work you were putting in, and how you kind of handled that and were proactive to kind of seek out the support you needed in terms of just appreciation or recognition. So I was just wondering if you guys had any experience that and how to go about that when it could happen.
Good question. Does anyone have an answer?
Yeah, I think I can take this one. Yeah, there are definitely times, especially when you're doing, um, content creation and you're there, you feel like you're there for almost every game, or you're always doing stuff for, maybe a program, and then you feel like maybe you don't get that thank you. But I think what I bring it back to, even if I'm not necessarily getting that verbal thank you or that physical card or really the acknowledgement, or maybe it's the end of the season and I'm still showing up to things and the athletes don't even know who I am. I think what I try to remind myself is, even if they might not necessarily realize what I'm doing, when I was a student athlete, I noticed when my team was featured. I noticed when we had some sort of cool, especially I think social media is the biggest thing. The student athletes love to see themselves and their teams being featured. So even if you don't necessarily hear that confirmation that they appreciate the work you do, I know that it impacts them because I was a student athlete and I remembered feeling special in those moments or when my teammates were recognized. So at the end of the day, even if you might not be getting those thank yous, those cards, that form of appreciation, or even the fact that they realize what you're doing, I do know it impacts the student athlete experience, and it's kind of what we're in it for. So even though it's important to get that recognition, sometimes maybe you also have to seek it from your supervisor. Maybe your supervisor will be the one to recognize it, even if the student athletes might not necessarily be the ones to see it.
Yeah, I think Jordyn, you touched on a little bit about it, like being open to find those little moments. So sometimes it could even be just the engagement you see on social media. You see people reposting what you've done and they're being excited about that athlete while they're not directly saying, "Hey, I appreciate what you did." Your work is being shared because they're appreciative of it. So, Jordyn, what about you? Do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I can add on the tail end of that and kind of how to be more proactive in creating those moments for yourself. I know with my teams, we always have meetings as support staff. So kind of setting those expectations before the season starts when things get stressful, knowing what our content's going to look like, all the content that I have coming out, the ideas that I have, and then engaging with them as a staff and seeing if this works. And when we execute it, then showing them, yeah, like look at what we did. This is some cool stuff. So at the same time, as coaches are really focused on their team, sometimes they don't know what's happening behind the scenes. So making them aware of those moments is opens your world up to a whole bunch of thank yous and thank you cards. So it's kind of like I said, creating that yourself.
Any last thoughts, Mike?
Yeah, I think when you work with enough coaches and you work with enough student athletes, every group's different and every team's different. I've worked with football now for 17 years and every single team is different. Even if the coaches are the same, you're going to have different personalities with your student athletes that you're going to be working with. I worked with our women's basketball team. That's a 16-person team as opposed to a football team that's 105. So you can get to know them a lot better and maybe they will appreciate it a little bit more than maybe you would from 105 guys, that you're dealing with. But I think the best piece of advice that I can give is get those expectations early and before your season starts from those coaches. Because 9 times out of 10, if a coach asks you to do X, Y, and Z, and at the end of this season, if you've done X, Y, and Z, they're going to be appreciative of it. But if you don't ask those questions or don't know what their expectations or what they would like to see come out of your area, then you can't necessarily expect them to be excited about what you're doing, if that makes sense. So I think getting those expectations, and if they say they want this, this, and this done, my experience over 20 years has come out that usually works out in your favor, and those coaches and those student athletes are very appreciative things as long as you know ahead of time that you've had those conversations and those expectations have been met and laid out, then you're probably going to have a pretty good year. You're going to run into to coaches that are a pain. It's just that's just the run of the land, and that's in any business profession. You're going to run into that, but you have to be in this business. You have to not take things personally. You have to learn from experience. You have to modify some things the way you communicate with one team may be completely different than how you have to deal with another coach in a different team. So you have to be multiple. You have to be able to work through different situations and just learn. That's the best you can do. But as long as you do it all with the right intentions and with integrity, you're probably going to come out on top.
Keontae is on our CSCU committee, and he made a good comment in this chat that, you know, sometimes it helps to turn the tables on them and show your appreciation towards those people, and then it might come back. So that's a good thing to think about as well. And, you know, sharing that appreciation doesn't have to stay within your institution. It can go, if there's somebody that has made an impact in your career, then show them. Like some of the people have said, you know, you never know when you're going to get those messages where it's someone later on in life saying, you know, like Sophia talked about, her former boss has said, hey, I saw your name and I recognize it. You never know how far those are going to go. Like she said, it's athletics is kind of a small world, even though it's a big world. So I just want to thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Sophia, Jordyn, and Mike, for being on our panel and sharing your advice. We appreciate your guys' continued support for college sports communicators. We are going to have a online survey. Becky just put it in the chat. It'll also pop up when we're off the Zoom. So please fill that out to help us improve for future programming. And thank you all again for being with us today. We appreciate it.